Whoa, man, if it isn't the radical dudes who've turned into our bodacious podcast, thank you for tuning in. I'm just one of your righteous hosts, Joseph the Broseph, and my other two hosts are.
Jack.
And Joe.
Come on, guys, where's that enthusiasm? Because today we're talking about the most super cool and most triumphant show, Stranger Things by the Duffer Brothers.
I'm pretty sure that you're channeling like 90s energy, and this is not a 90s show.
I don't think we watched the same show.
Yeah.
Did you watch Baywatch? What did you watch?
I'll have you know, I looked up the most relevant 80s slang from the first link I pulled up on Google. I mean, legitimate research.
Oh, so it has to be right. That's fair. Okay.
But anyway, yeah, we're talking about 2016's? Yeah, 2016's Stranger Things season 1. The smash hit from all just all indications that the smash hit science fiction 80s based sci-fi no, I already said sci-fi horror drama television show created by two of North Carolina's own, the Duffer Brothers.
I did not know that.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Wait a minute. Hold on. They're based in North Carolina, but they set the story in Indiana.
Not feeling a lot of love.
I'm from Indiana, and now I live in North Carolina. So this is like a show tailor-made for me.
This is some kind of you're opening some kind of rift in time, honestly.
Yeah,
it's just the coincidences are too great.
And we're gonna fall into the upside down if we keep talking about it.
Oh yeah. Well, Joe, you'd tell us if you had psychic powers, right? You know, we're your friends, and definitely don't have ties to the NSA or any other shady government organizations. You'd tell us, right?
Oh, of course I'd tell you. I'd also, wipe your mind with those same psychic powers, but I'd tell you.
He's told us 1,000 times, Joseph.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right.
Yeah, side effects include forgetting where your keys are and other random quirks like that. So if you start noticing that you can't remember things, it's because I've told you and wiped your brain so many times.
That would do it.
Your secret's safe, but he thinks he's the Mushroom King and kind of forgets who he is half the time. But yeah, there's that. Anyway, Joe, why don't you, being a resident psychic and lover of all things 80s, because you've seen so many of them, so many 80s-based properties, why don't you tell us a little bit about Stranger Things?
Oh, first of all, we do have some bookkeeping issues. Bookkeeping notes.
So notes. That's right. I'm jumping the gun. I'm just so hang on, where's my slang page? Outrageously excited about the show.
So as has been discussed before, I started streaming. Right now I'm streaming myself playing Pokemon on Twitch on Friday nights, and this last Friday night we actually streamed where my two co-hosts here on Background Noise joined me, and we kind of had an unofficial sort of laid-back episode discussing the trilogy, the Back to the Future trilogy. So if you want to listen to our thoughts on Back to the Future, not in the normal podcast form, the VOD is still available on Twitch. Professor Draken is my Twitch name handle. I don't know what the phrase is used there. And I'm sure that Jack will link that in the show notes. So, and also check us out every Friday evening starting at 7 if you want to listen to. I will be there. I'll talk about movies, and sometimes I'll have these losers on to talk about movies and TV shows and games with me.
How kind.
Low blow, Joe.
Graciously providing a platform to disseminate more nonsense from.
Yeah, it got pretty exciting. Not gonna lie, I was blown away. It was just I've never experienced anything quite as amazing. It really is fun though, so definitely check it out if you get a chance.
High praise.
Yes, thank you.
All right, so back to our plot synopsis, and we usually try to keep the plot synopses short. I will do my best here. I will try to cover all.
Show.
This
is
is
whole season. I mean, yeah.
This is almost 8 hours of content, so I'm going to try to do my best to condense that into a reasonable amount of time. So we start off. With is a hot open the opposite of a cold open? We start off in medias res with a scientist being chased by an unknown horror in a science lab in the middle of Indiana, the most horrifying place on Earth. And then we cut to 4 nerdy middle school boys who are playing D&D together, as middle school boys did in the 1980s, which is important. It actually is important because the way they talk about stuff going forward, the way that it's Mike, Lucas, Duncan, Will are the 4 boys. They use the terminology from D&D throughout the show, and so that's why it's actually relevant that you see them playing it. We then see Will gets captured. He gets captured by an unknown something and disappears, while simultaneously a girl who is like dirty and disheveled and wearing nothing but a hospital gown shows up at a diner. And then we go to then it is in the first episode that the diner owner calls like a CPS kind of thing, or some kind of child services people.
Yeah, Benny calls like this. Yeah, Social Security or something like.
Not Social Security.
Child Protective Services. That's what it is.
CPS
and the sheriff, I think.
Yes, and then the people who show up are not the people that he called, and are in fact the people who run the fancy secret evil science lab. They kill Benny, and the girl whose name ends up being 11, so I guess we'll just go ahead and call her 11 from now on, runs off, and she runs into the 3 other boys while they're searching for their friend. Next up, we get the boys are still trying to look for Will, and Will's family. Jonathan is the older brother, and
Joyce is the mom.
Joyce. Yes. Okay. I was right. I was going to say Joyce, and I was like, no, that's not right, but it is Joyce. Okay. Joyce and Jonathan are looking for Will as well. And so these are the ongoing plot lines, is like the weirdness of 11, what's going on with her, and looking for Will. They're the 2 ongoing plot lines. So episode 2, we have 11 kind of showing off the fact that she has weird powers. She has telekinesis and maybe some other abilities that are less thoroughly explained. We also see that Mike's older sister, Nancy, is dating a boy. They do some unmentionable things, and Jonathan, while looking for Will, takes a photo of them doing unmentionable things, and also takes a photo of Nancy's friend Barb, who then just disappears immediately after the photo is taken. Oh no, what's going on here? Another person's disappeared. So then we get episode 3, where we have Joyce is kind of spiraling, and so she's maybe hallucinating, except she's actually not hallucinating. She's actually completely sane here when she starts thinking that she can hear Will talking to her, because it turns out that he's in this place called the Upside Down, which is like the reverse mirror image world. And so he's technically still in the house. He's just not in the house where she can see him. And so like whenever he touches stuff, he turns on the lights. And so she's like using the lights to try to communicate with him, which is kind of a cool idea, just by the way. Let's see what else. Nancy's current boyfriend finds out that Jonathan took weird compromising photos and destroys his camera, but then Nancy's like, oh hey, there's something weird about these photos. Maybe it has something to do with the fact that Barbara's gone missing. And so they start teaming up. I guess they start teaming up in episode 3.
Yeah, it sounds right.
Mm-hmm.
You touched on Hopper yet?
Oh, I haven't even been talking about Hopper, because Hopper's like undercurrenting there's so much stuff going on here. I don't even know if a summary is.
It's an ensemble cast, so it makes sense. This is all going on at the same time.
Because all throughout this, Hopper is working with Joyce and also doing his own investigation work. I don't know all of the things that he does, because he's finding clues that are actually relevant to Eleven's story, thinking that they're relevant to Will's story. Because he finds out about the boy, quote unquote, he has 11 with shaved head, that was at Benny's diner, and finds out that that kids have been abducted or kidnapped or have gone missing, something like that. And so he's tracking down all these leads that are going on. Let's see. We've got at the end of episode 3, 11 had thought that she could show the other boys where Will was, and it ends up they find Will, quote unquote, Will's body. Turns out that the body, we found this in later episodes, so I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. We find out that this body is not actually Will. We find out that it is a plant by the government people running the evil lab, because they want people to stop asking questions. Because honestly, would you guys stop asking questions? We're just trying to do evil science over here. Would you just let us do evil science in peace? That's basically what happens.
Pretty much.
Episode 4 is pretty much all about the body. Is it literally titled The Body? That's like the core is this actually Will? Is this not Will?
More government conspiracy stuff.
Yeah, all the government conspiracy stuff kind of getting unraveled a little bit there. People finding out about it. We also have the side thing of Nancy still trying to look. Unfortunately, Barb's story is a side story, which is like, you feel bad for her, but there's so much going on in here that it's hard to give everyone the time that they need. So there's Nancy looking for Barb. That's kind of the secondary thing, because we're still more focused on Will and 11, which ends in 11 using a radio to pick up Will's voice in the Upside Down. Then we have episode 5, which is where Will's funeral occurs, even though at that point nobody actually believes that he's dead. Like none of the characters that we care about actually believe that he's dead. I think even by episode 11, maybe Hopper, or episode 11, episode 5. God, I think by episode 5, or within episode 5, is when Hopper figures out that it was a plant. I believe somewhere in there.
Yeah, 4 he realizes it's a fake, and then 5 he goes into like the government lab.
Yeah, that sounds right. But the boys do find out about the concept of the Upside Down, how that will work, that it's like a weird mirror image of our world, and that an opening between our world and this other world would have a bunch of different effects, including electromagnetic field. So they're going to go track it using compasses, because it'll deflect the compass. But 11 knows what's happening in the lab, because that's where she came from. She's terrified of her new friends getting hurt by those people, and so tries to stop them, and that ends up causing a fight, causes the party to fall apart, and then they kind of go their separate ways by the end of that episode. That by that point, Nancy, in her search for Barb, has met up with Jonathan. They've kind of conferred notes, and they're now on the same page, and they go looking for Will and Barb in the woods, thinking that they know what they're looking for. Nancy actually goes into the Upside Down for a short period of time and very narrowly manages to escape. Like, she almost gets closed inside before they manages to come back through. That leads us to episode 6, where Nancy and Jonathan are kind of like dealing with the fact that the Upside Down is a thing, trying to figure out, like, trying to process that, trying to figure out what they need to do next. Joyce and Hopper are like working concurrently now, because they both now know Will's actually definitely alive, and there's some weird government nonsense going on, so they're tracking down leads with that. And then we have 11 is gone rogue, and so we get a scene with her in the grocery store where she like steals a bunch of Eggo waffles and then just like destroys the front door when she leaves. But she does find Mike and Dustin in time to save them from some bullies, which I forgot to mention them before, because they're kind of a minor point, but they are relevant, at least here, because it brings 11 back into the group.
Right.
And then we go to episode 7, where we learn that, by the end of episode 6, they're coming back to Mike's house to like reconvene, figure out what to do next. but the agents are on the move now. The agents have gotten fed up with waiting for things to happen on other people's time, and now they're going to make things happen on their own time. And so we get a really cool chase scene where we have the 3 boys and all 4 boys, because Lucas is back, rejoined them. All 4 boys on bikes with 11 riding like on the back seat of Mike's bike, where they're getting chased by vans all throughout the neighborhood, and 11 flips a van over their heads and crashes it into all the other vans so they get away. And then the Joyce Hopper team have teamed up with the Nancy Jonathan team. They put their pieces together, and then they team up with the 4 more adult characters team up with the 5 child characters, and they put all of the pieces together. So episode 7 is like all of the pieces coming together of these separate plot lines reintertwining. We get 11 using her powers to confirm that Barb is dead, but Will is still alive, but still in the Upside Down. And then we get the final episode, which is where we actually have the final confrontation where the scientist people try to take 11, and that doesn't go very well for them. We have Joyce and Hopper who go into the Upside Down to find Will, and then they do end up saving him, bringing him back through. And then we have...
And what happens to Barb?
Barb was dead, right? She died. She's just
right.
Straight up dead.
I just wasn't sure if you mentioned that, so just making sure.
Yeah. And then we get Nancy and Jonathan, who were trying to kill the creature. They called it the Demigorgon. That's like the D&D, whatever, a D&D reference. They're trying to kill the creature, and then Steve, Nancy's not really any more boyfriend, I guess kind of boyfriend, shows up to like apologize for being a really terrible person earlier in the show, and then finds out that that is not even important at this point. Like, we are dealing with monsters and telepathy and telekinesis, and the fact that you are kind of a horrible person earlier is not that big of a deal. But he ends up kind of redeeming himself by being like coming to their help and actually like coming in and beating the crap out of this thing with a bat with spikes shoved through it. So doesn't actually kill it, but he does show up.
Yes.
And then finally the Demigorgon comes over and is attacking the school where the scientist people have the kids cornered, because 11 can't use her powers anymore because she's so drained from using them earlier. And so she's not able to just take everyone out. But the Demigorgon takes everyone out because, it's a hungry, ravenous monster, and they can't kill it. And then she rallies just enough to be able to destroy it, and also vanishes mysteriously. And then, the end of the episode, everyone's celebrating. They're a little sad that Elle has died, maybe, or is missing. They're not sure. It's left intentionally vague at that point. But everyone's happy that Will is back, until he goes into the bathroom and vomits up a slug into the sink, and then
as one does,
right? Doesn't tell anyone about this, because why would anyone need to know that information?
I'm sure that's normal, puberty and all that.
Whatever, you get hair in weird places, you vomit up slugs.
Yep.
You start being interested in people you weren't interested in before. It's all the same.
Listen, it's Christmas. We save that stuff for New Year's or a year later.
But then we also do get kind of a confirmation that 11 is still alive, because Hopper goes and is placing Eggo waffles and other treats for her in a safe box. And so we have the story wrapped up, except for the fact that 11 is still alive and something is weird with Will. And so we have that little sequel hook at the end that will lead us into season 2, which we will talk about eventually. But I think I got that into under 10 minutes.
That was impressive, sir. That was
certainly under 15. So
yeah, that was pretty good.
Hopefully that was coherent and comprehensive.
I mean, I kind of stopped listening after you said, was it the characters? Yeah, I stopped listening about that, I'm afraid.
Wow.
But yes, thank you for that, Joe. That was quite an undertaking for such a robust series, honestly.
There's a lot of stuff that I missed. There's a lot of like little side beats and fun little interactions between the characters that I couldn't even go into because like we're just trying to hit the highlights here to get to the main point.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I think that just goes to show how jam-packed this show is for only being 8 episodes. It's ridiculous how much they fit in there and how much of it works. And how much, I mean, they leave some things open, but a lot of the questions you have at the beginning are either solved or given some sort of explanation that will hold you over until season 2. So,
yeah,
exactly. And I keep saying series instead of season because it's just, well, to me, this feels like just this could have been fine on its own.
Yeah,
I didn't mind. I didn't mind the other seasons, but I feel like this is just the definitive. Like this story is perfect on its own. It's funny that a story just wrapped in all this 80s stuff, which we'll get into, and I got some things about like using eras in recent movies or whatever, but yeah, just wrapped in this little wrapper of 80s stuff is just like this perfect little science fiction story. It's funny, really.
Yeah,
no, it's great. I do find it amusing. I made this observation earlier that the last thing we did an official episode on was Princess Bride, an 80s movie. On the Twitch stream, we talked about Back to the Future, which is both an 80s series and one of the key settings is in the 80s. And now we're talking about something that was, it was made in the 2010s, but is set in the 80s very intentionally and very obviously.
And keeping on that track, we're going to talk about Morbius next week.
Yeah, another great 80s classic.
I mean, the first episode is... No, I'm not even going to try. I'm not even going to pull out the board for that one. Yeah. But yeah, this was unintentionally 80s month, except for Batman. I mean, and then we can't pull out the board because, Batman had movies come out in the 80s, stuff like that.
No, we're not going to stretch it.
Yeah.
No. But yeah, now that everyone kind of basically knows what we're talking about, let's go with a fine-tooth comb to things that you'll only know about if you watch the series. We are getting into, our favorite moments, our favorite scenes, our favorite characters, character arcs, just everything, anything and everything we might want to talk about with the show. Favorite camera stuff. I got a couple of those because. A lot of the influences that the Duffer Brothers used are a lot of my kind of favorite 80s directors as well. Well, not just 80s, but their big stuff's in the 80s. But I am gonna add a caveat. Let's save the horror elements for later because I got a little something planned for that.
Ooh.
Oh, goody.
So who wants to start?
Sure. That's fine with you, Joe. Yeah, I'll just go
ahead. You have go.
Let me see here. First thing that comes to mind as far as characters, I absolutely love. I mean, I don't know if he's my favorite character throughout the whole show, but at least this season, I absolutely love Hopper. I love his character arc. Yep. He starts out as this guy who, I mean, the first scene is just him waking up, has highlighting his horrible habits. He doesn't seem like he's in great shape, just in life or physically, and so. He just does his job because that's what he does. But throughout the show, he grows to actually care about people in the town and just about the town and about his job. And it's wonderful to see him actually care about his job and doing his job very well. It's around season 2 or 3 that he starts breaking into things and uncovering stuff like a good sheriff should. Or officer, I can't remember what position he actually is. Is he sheriff?
He is the sheriff. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like a good sheriff, Chief Hopper is there, and
like a good sheriff, Chief Hopper is there.
And so, just seeing that whole arc was just an absolute treat to see, and I love his character. From what I remember, I like his growth in 2 and 3 as well. We'll probably get into that deeper, but just here in season 1, from the beginning of the show to the end of this first season, it's just an absolute blast to watch. Steve's another character who I think it's even better in season 2. But in season 1, it was funny because I remember obviously he has the great scene at the end there in season 8 where he totally trashes that Demogorgon, which I absolutely love. It was probably what made me first like Steve, was when he shows some courage. But going back and watching this, I realized overall Steve is actually not that bad of a guy. There's the occasional thing he does, but really it's like, okay, Jonathan's the guy who's being the creep and taking pictures, which he totally didn't need to do.
Yes.
So I'm actually more on Steve's side than I'm on Jonathan's for a lot of it.
Yeah, like that's an interesting point, is like in a sane universe, right? In a universe where there aren't horrifying monstrosities that want to eat your face and scream incoherently at you, right? There's no reason. Like, Steve has every reason to be like, what is up? Why are you hanging around with Jonathan? This doesn't make any sense. Obviously, there's something wrong going on. Maybe I need to be a little concerned for you. And then when I see that you like Jonathan, then now I need to be concerned about you. Right. So it's like, now I don't think that he handles it like an immature teenage boy at some points, which makes sense because he's like, what, 16, 17 years old?
He's a teenage boy. So yes.
Right. He's an immature teenage boy. So of course, it's like, I'm not saying that there are mistakes that he makes that are not like excusable, because he is a teenage boy. But you're like, okay, I understand. It's just that it happens to be that they don't live in a sane world. They live in a world where you could travel into the upside down, where everything wants to murder you, and if you get stuck in there, you'll die. And so maybe Steve needs to prioritize things a bit better.
Yes, Steve is very much to the normal town, like the face of the normal town facade that's being projected onto Hawkins, and the minute he just realizes that something else is going on, he's like, oh well, that's there, let me take this bat, which is just the best part about it. He's you wouldn't think he'd be, because he feels like he'd be, if this was, forget about the kids, he feels like he'd be the protagonist almost, like, because he's like your regular hero. He's got like his good moments, he's got his flaws, which are kind of glaring, like you said, with some of the things that he does, but in the end he's like, he becomes the one of the big heroes amongst our three teenager characters. And it turns out,
well, it's interesting because he doesn't have character flaws. The way some people think of character flaws is like, here's the character, and then I'm going to attach a flaw onto them. It's like, oh, well, here's a perfect character, I'm going to stick some flaws on them so they're interesting. No. Give your character personality traits and then put them in situations where those personality traits are horrible. Like, because they have those traits, it causes problems. But if they're in a different situation, like him being a little bit impulsive and prone to making like rash decisions is great.
And being susceptible to peer pressure.
And is great when he's like, I need to go in there and save my friends from this monster. I can't stay out here. I have to go in and save them. Now, it's bad when he thinks that maybe his girlfriend is cheating on him and he's going to do some impulsive stuff because of that.
Right. And I'd say the worst part about him is just that he hangs out with the wrong people. Once he lets go of them, then he really grows and becomes awesome. But I feel like a lot of the mistakes and worse stuff that he ends up doing is because of those influences.
Yeah,
exactly.
I think that's also very true. I'm talking about Steve as well because my two favorite characters, especially as the show progresses, are Hopper and Steve.
Yep.
And the reason is, I think I've said this before on the podcast, that usually my favorite characters are the dad characters. And you especially, there's not so much in season 1 that you see Steve be the dad character, but in the later seasons, he is definitely the dad for the 4 boys. And it's great. I love it. But we'll talk about that later. We could talk about Hopper more, because one of my favorite scenes is the Hopper breaking into the lab. That whole, it's technically multiple scenes, but it's like, it's all one set.
Starting with him breaking into the morgue, going into breaking into the lab.
That's actually good. Yeah, even further back. Yeah, from the point when he realizes there's something going on, and I think he talks to the guy in the bar first, and he's like, he kind of lies his way to get some information, and then he goes and he gets into the morgue and he punches the guy out. No, yes, yeah. Does he punch the guy out?
Yeah, that's what happens.
Yeah,
it's great.
Yeah,
he asked him, it's like, oh yeah, what's his face told me to come over here and relieve you. It's like, I don't work with what's his face. Like,
it's
okay.
Yeah, exactly. Cuts the guy open, cuts the mannequin, I guess, open.
Yeah.
And then like the way that he's handling getting into the lab, oh man, it's great. I love it. I love every part of that scene.
It's awesome.
It really makes you wonder. It's like, dude, this guy's not just a sheriff. What else was he?
Yeah. Yeah. You realize that if he hadn't like suffered the loss, because it kind of implied that, you know, we know explicitly that his daughter died.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then his life falls apart because of that. And so you're like, okay, what could he have been capable of if he hadn't been in this self-medicated haze of anxiety and depression for the last probably 10 years or so? Which he grows out of, right? He kind of moves out of that by finding a purpose to pull him forward. So it's great. I love it.
Mm-hmm. I'm just gonna. This is what is it? This reminds me of like the thing where it's like, oh, we have all these main characters to choose from, and it's like, get them out of here. Give me Hopper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and the three boys are great, and 11. The three boys and 11 are great. Will isn't really a main character. He's a damsel in distress, right?
He's the catalyst.
Yeah.
Not only the catalyst for the plot, but like for a lot of details we get on like the characters because of their relationships with him and whatnot, especially Jonathan.
Right.
Yep.
But anyway, back to the star of the show.
Back to the Chief Hopper.
Yes.
Sheriff Hopper.
I do think in that little sequence of him discovering the truth and like, you know, going into the lab and finding the bodies, one of the favorite little moments that David Harbour's able to pull off is just him. It's everybody fell for the old fake dead kid trick, but not him. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But you can see like when he's trying to figure out, hey, do I do this to see if he's fake, or do I actually like accidentally defile this child's body on accident? Yep. He's just like, there's an entire emotional roller coaster of him like doing that, just. And you can see it's like in his head, and just the way that David Harbour does with the character's body language is. I'm surprised he hadn't had any bigger roles. Like David Harbour hadn't had any bigger roles until this one, because he's a standout in terms of performances for me. Him and Winona Ryder.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see.
Yeah, I mean, it's different with Winona Ryder because it's not necessarily that she's likable, but you really feel for her because you know she's telling the truth, and you know what she's saying in any normal circumstance would sound insane, and you just feel for her because you know if she was telling you those things in any normal situation, you think she's crazy, but you know she's not. So you really do feel for her, and she really does play the concerned mom very well.
Yes. Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, you not only does she like play that character of like leading on the edge of, she is technically completely sane, but
right?
Also, she understands that she's kind of acting crazy. Like you like the anguish in her voice and the anxiety in her voice and the stress, like of like, you know, when she's in the cupboard with the lights begging Will to talk to her.
Right,
man, it's great. All those scenes are very well done.
Oh! Speaking of the lights, yeah, what is it? One of the big visuals that has just become kind of synonymous with the series as a whole is that Christmas light wall.
Mm-hmm.
And I really think that that just kind of that's perfect. Just the way it's like that element gets introduced of, you know, oh, he's communicating through the lights and stuff, and just it gives her more moments to like kind of it. This is going to lead me to like a kind of off topic thing, but it's like, have either of you seen Close Encounters of the Third Kind?
No,
I actually have not.
Okay, well, as of course, other 80s movie, but the Duffer Brothers cited that as an inspiration for her character because in that film, Richard Dreyfuss, was it Matt Hooper from Jaws? His character essentially sees a UFO or whatever, and then he gets like a vision of like some kind of mountain or something, and he like goes nuts. He like builds a giant to scale model. He like makes it out of his mashed potatoes. He like drives his family off. He's just he's just so obsessed and crazy about it. But kind of like Joyce, I can't remember a character's name, but yeah, kind of like her. You know,
Byers.
Yeah, Miss Byers. You know,
Byers woman.
Woman Buyer, yeah. you know she's like telling the truth, or you know that they're telling the truth, but they're so obsessive with it. It's just they can't help but be sympathetic. And go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were done with your thought. You finish your thought first.
No, you're good. I rambled on a bit there, but anyway, just that scene of her stringing things up, and there's like the music crescendos or something, like the synth score kind of goes up, and it's like just as it's trying to spell, like as he's trying to spell stuff out, and it's just kind of a moment of vindication, followed by another part I'll get into next time because I got to follow my own in the next section because I got to follow my own rules. But go ahead, Joe.
I was gonna say, like, I really enjoy. I think it's at the beginning of episode 7 where the whole team meets up in the Byers' house, and the people who have been seeing pieces of the problem but haven't been at the center of it are reacting to this, because the house is really the center of everything going on, and they're reacting to like, there are lights all over the place. What's going on with the wall? Why is there a hole in the wall? What is going on? Like, they're realizing, oh, this is much more chaotic and frantic and scrambled than we thought it was. Like, we were seeing pieces of it, and we thought this is bad, but there is a lot worse stuff going on. So,
if only you knew how bad things were.
Yeah. Yep.
This is not necessarily about characters or anything, but more just the show itself. Something I thought was interesting. I don't know if you'll get into this, Joseph, just about it being one of the first Netflix original shows. And this is what I remember very clearly. It was one of the first. I think this, and the other one I think was maybe Orange is the New Black. But it was like, these were like the first 2 Netflix original shows that like people binge very seriously. It was one of the shows that really made binging a show a thing. I mean, Netflix did that in general, but this was one of the shows that really highlighted on that, because people would binge like shows that were put onto Netflix, like Breaking Bad and all that. But this was one of the shows that really emphasized and really started the binge culture that we're in.
Yeah, you're right. I remember, was it because this came out in high school for me, at least. It's just like everybody was talking about it. It's like, oh yes, I'm a youngin'. It's not my fault. But yeah, everybody was talking about it, and it's like, oh, what do you mean you watched it like in one sitting, guys? Was it like, I understand it's like, being a gamer, I understand sitting down in one place for 12 hours at a time, but it's like, God, it's a show. When it's like, didn't you like get up and do something? And it's like, yeah, that was the first show I understood. Okay, you got me hooked.
Yeah,
let me watch it all at once.
Yeah. Yes, I did get up and do stuff. I got up and got more popcorn to eat while I continued to watch the show. Obviously. But yeah, no, I was in college when this show came out. Unlike you children. But yeah, it was. I mean, everyone was talking about it, and it was a thing that we binged all the way through and loved talking about it as we were watching it. So it was great, and it shows you that. It showed people that there was an appetite for that long form content, like a really long, good, detailed, exciting, tightly packed story. Yeah.
That's one of these shows that is like, you could say very few things. It's like not an inch of fat on it, sort of thing.
Yeah.
I
can't think of any scene where I maybe there's a scene that could be trimmed, but there's definitely not a scene that could be cut.
Oh yeah.
Yep. It all works very well, and really it gets you hooked from the start, really.
Yep.
Let me see. There was one more thing I wanted to bring up before we get into. Oh yeah. Yeah, here it is. I got a lot of notes on this one. But yeah. I really liked what is it, the scene with Jonathan and Will. I think it's in episode 5 or 4 or 5, because it's just as, what is it, everyone thinks he's dead sort of thing. And like, you know, he's got like a flashback to them, like him listening to the Clash. And it's just like that is the perfect example of just, I know it's going to sound like, yes, this good writing because I like this show, therefore good writing. But isn't it, you know, this is the perfect example of good writing, because there's so many different layers to that one. It's like, you know, before it's shown that, you know, Jonathan hasn't exactly been like the best, or he thinks he's not been the best brother, and you know, we don't really know too much about Will. So both of those kind of are able to, by both of them being in a flashback, they automatically get some more characterization. But you know, it also kind of everything in this show is deliberate, down to the references, to the music. And that song in particular just shows that it was crafted well, because, you know, was it the Clash was kind of one of the founders of was it punk, kind of one of the founders of like the 80s counterculture or something. And it's just like, you know, of course Jonathan would listen to that because he's a weirdo, you know. He's like, oh, you wouldn't understand it. But then it's like, you know, just giving him something to bond over his brother with. And well, go ahead.
Are you saying that people who listen to punk music are weirdos?
I'm saying in the 80s they might have been. However, now
all right,
they still are. Anyway, but yeah, that's just one of many examples of like all the layers they put in there just to, again, help communicate these characters who in the end are kind of, it's funny, we've brought up Princess Bride earlier. It's like they're archetypes, but they're given real life person depth. It's like these are might as well be real people. Might as well have pulled them from some 80s high school annual or something. This is like, yeah.
Well, it is meta drama, but also drama, right? Like all of the characters are heightened versions of themselves, but also perfectly believable as people. And if you just got all of these heightened nth level people in the same room together, we might spontaneously have monsters just appear just because that needs to happen.
Just pull it right out of the ether, or the upside down, I should say.
Or the upside down.
Ooh, that is actually the perfect segue, Joe, because, I mean, you know, stop me if we want to talk about anything else, but I think we need to get on to the horror part of this sci-fi horror drama thriller whatever show. Because it is very clearly a heavy element for it. It even came out around Halloween, right? If memory serves right.
I believe so.
First season did. The second, the later seasons, they didn't all hit exactly at that release date, but the first season came out, I think, late October specifically.
I want to say the second did too. I could be wrong, but I know they very specifically. I know the second season takes place during Halloween. I think it's a year later because they're wearing their Ghostbusters costumes and all that.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I thought it was at least fall of whatever year it came out, but I could be wrong.
I think so. It could be second one was good, and then the third one they delayed until the summer.
I think it was the third, yeah, and now this one, obviously, coming up, season 4.
This time they definitely have an excuse. So
right,
yeah. Well,
we ruined your segue. Get back into the horror.
Got to get back on the segue. It fell down. Okay, we're ready. One of the big influences that the Duffer Brothers had, just in general, for the overall tone and feel of the show, was 80s Amblin films. You got your, you know, pretty much think of whatever it is. You got your kind of Back to the Future, kind of more E.T. and Stand By Me, if I would say anything. It's like, you know, those two movies combined, was it Stand By Me being an adaptation of a Stephen King work about like 4 young boys going on an adventure. It's kind of more in the drama area, like of this, like, you know, I'd say the more dramatic elements of this show took heavy influence for that. Well, not heavy. The show's definitely its own thing, of course, not derivative. but big influence from that. And then like the science fiction and horror elements came from E.T., which of course E.T. is not a horror movie unless you ask certain people, they'll probably say E.T. is a horrifying creature, but
Well,
like that Amblin feels sort of like not overtly scary because they're PG films, but more to do with like the an atmosphere of kind of like creepiness, like the opening scene of ET where he's in the cornfield and like the lighting's really dark and there's only that one overhead light and like, oh, what's in the field? This is kind of creepy. But then of course it goes into full on zany alien adventure later. But the Duffer Brothers were heavily inspired by that PG bordering on PG-13 level of, we don't want this to be like overtly gory in terms of that term and that kind of horror, but we want it to be scary. And I think they pulled it off very, very well with some of the stuff that they did. And that's why this segment is all about this kind of the scary, creepy, what is it? The best scares, the best scenes that kind of had that eerie feel. Because there's definitely a lot of them that add to the overall quality of this show in a way that I felt like warranted its own category, really.
I think if Jack, if you don't mind me
starting, go for it. Yeah.
I one of the biggest things, like pieces of writing advice if you're doing horror, is don't show your monsters until you have to. And they do an excellent job of that, because the first time we get a quote unquote clear picture of the monster is literally when they do the zoom and enhance on the picture and they see that there is this humanoid shape. Like before that, you might get like a little bit of a jump of a flash of something going by the screen, but that's it. You do not see the monster until then. And then it's this vague, half blurred, disturbing image of something that's lurking out of the woods. And you're like, okay, all right, that's cool.
Okay, there it is. They didn't do any touch-ups in post, but there it is.
Yeah. That is an excellent reveal of the monster. And then the second reveal, the actual physical reveal, is Nancy seeing it eating the deer. I believe that is the first time you physically see it.
I'm trying to think, do we see it when Barb gets taken to the Upside Down?
That's that picture thing he's talking about.
But in the actual Upside Down,
we only see like blurs of it. Like we don't actually see it. We see like it going past the screen or something like that.
Okay.
I think it's a bunch of fast cuts of like stuff like that, and then there's like a scream, and then she's just gone.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah. Well, we do not actually see the creature, so the Demogorgon, I guess we'll call it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
this got a lot of Jaws influence too, really, because was it? She's by a pool. It's kind of a stretch, I guess, but it's like, oh yeah, by a pool and got eaten by a monster. It's like water monster, Jaws, yeah.
Would not surprise me if they're influenced by 80s horror movies and pseudo horror movies.
Yeah. Well, they even made the shark comparison, like Jonathan and Nancy reading that book about the blood and all that.
Yeah, that's right. Blood in the water.
Right. So, you already highlighted on the monster thing's the big thing. The only other thing I can think of is really, the Upside Down, that whole world and how they created that, I thought looked very good. It looked very terrifying and definitely, just fit the tone of the show very well. It looked like something that you would see in an 80s horror film, but it's like not something they could have made in the 80s.
I'm sure that somebody has said this before. It looks like a nuclear wasteland, right? It looks like a nuclear wasteland version of the town with like the radioactive winter snow falling out of the sky.
Yeah,
that's what it looks like. I just thought of this myself. I had this epiphany as Jack was describing it or was talking about it, but I wonder how intentional that was. Like of a design choice for the look.
I do wonder. We'll have to look into that for the later seasons, because that features the Upside Down a little bit more, and of course it's got a dash of Lovecraftian horror thrown in with all those all those weird growths and the,
Mm-hmm.
alien predators that are the Demogorgons.
Yeah.
I do. One of the things they do, I can't remember if they do this in later seasons, but the fact that the Upside Down is not like an explained thing, right? Like we talk about how it is a world on the other side of ours, and there's some allusions to like a fantasy description of how that would work, but we don't ever sit down with a scientist and they say, yes, well, you see, this place is the place where the blah, blah, blah happens, and we have the blah, 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 and the reason it looks like this is because of blah, 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 and we have the blah, blah, blah species.
Of all the universe's dark matter.
Yeah, it's like, we don't have anything like that, and so it stays scary. It's the same thing. It's the same thing as the monster. You don't see it standing on the screen screaming at you, so it stays scarier, and we don't get a description for how I almost said the underground, how the Upside Down works. And so because of that, it stays more eerie and unsettling.
Mm-hmm, definitely.
Right, because we don't even see somebody enter it. I mean, like, we will see the entrance, and we'll see the Upside Down, we don't see somebody actually enter it until much later. So it just holds sort of this ominous effect to it because of how little we see it. And when we do see it, it just, it looks like this wasteland where monsters live, and most people there are dead. So not a place you want to, build a summer home or something.
Yeah. I could build a summer home here. Maybe not. It also brings up the scary factor that they do the classic, all right, tie this guy to a line and send him in for exploration. And then of course he gets mauled and just pull the line back. It's just, your classic scene there. And then let's see. There was Jack, you said something that kind of. Oh no, Joe, you said it. Is the fact that we really only get like these descriptions from they get it from like a D&D manual of like, oh yes, it's the whatever thing. It's like, I feel like that's another good element. I'm gonna get a little bit out of the horror stuff. I'll tell mine in a second, but this was the other thing I was going to talk about. I'm very, very disjointed for some reason, but anyway, that's kind of that thing of these kids are really. I mean, they're going through a situation that no one else ever has, pretty much. So the only way they can come up with little answers here is they either pull from like the adults, and then you quickly realize they quickly realize that anybody could Lando them. And then and then the other thing is they pretty much just pull from what they know, which is like all these different little pop cultural things, like, oh yeah, the D&D thing, or like, oh, it's like, again, like, oh, it's like Lando from that. And that to me is like references done well because they serve a purpose. Because I mean, these are kids. That's what they're gonna do. They're gonna pull from what they've seen to kind of make sense of all this. And I feel like that's why them going through all this adventure and whatnot works out as well as it does. Because in this setting, I mean, because it's like they've got all that to pull from. And of course, they hit it. Of course, they hit on it a little for like 80s nostalgia or whatever. But in the end, that was not like that. You can tell that wasn't the end goal.
Yeah.
It's not just for them to gawk, like not just for the audience to gawk at the nostalgic setting. Like, I don't mean to bring up superhero movies, but I'm thinking, big blockbusters. This is a big blockbuster series, big blockbuster movie. Was it the Wonder Woman sequel? It's just like, okay, this could take place anywhere, but it's in the 80s because you guys love the 80s. Whether you do or not, you love the 80s.
Yeah.
The chart says
that now is the time to love the 80s. So love this movie. We put the 80s in it, as opposed to we love the 80s, and so we're going to put the stuff that we love into it, and then the people who also love that will enjoy it the same way we enjoy it.
Right. And we also happen to be competent writers and directors, so there's that.
Hey, that also helps.
That helps a lot.
Here's an idea. Talk about things that you like and be really good about it, and everyone will enjoy it.
Like this podcast.
Exactly. Yes. But yeah, I'm back on the stuff. The scene I was going to talk about earlier was when Lady Byers woman is finally
Joyce
able
Byers.
Yes, Lady Byers woman. Let's go with that. Winona Byers is finally able to communicate with Will, and it's just the most triumphant scene in a couple episodes because she's kind of finally confirmed that she's not crazy, and I mean the audience kind of already knew, but still sort of confirmed to herself that she's not crazy, and then to just follow it up with Run getting spelled out, it's just like, oh, that's great, really creepy but great. And then just the thing busting out of the wall, like, was it and again 80s movie trying to come out like Freddy Krueger, like out of the jello wall or whatever it is. It's crazy. And that's the first time we get like a very clear picture of the thing before the lights like flicker out and Joyce runs for her life, understandably. And it's that's another one of those perfect scenes. It's like, it gives us a good character moment. It gives us a good scare, some good atmosphere, and it gives us some important information on like the central mystery too. It's like we get another rule of like the Demogorgon creature. It's like, oh yeah, it can show up anywhere really. And so that's another scary element that was really good.
Good stuff. Yeah.
All right. Well, it seems like we've gone through our highlights and whatnot. So now is the time you've all been waiting for, dudes and dudettes and all that other stuff. Welcome to Joe's Jodacious 80s themed Stranger Things episode game show. Title patent pending. Yes, that's right. Put in the Clash. Put in the Clash in the background, Jack.
We can't afford that.
It's a good point. Put in the Clash's closest. Thank you, Joe. There we go.
Should I stay or eat Eggos?
Wonderful. You get bonus points for that one, Joe.
Thank you.
There we go.
I'll remember that.
All right. Now this one is kind of, since we've all seen the show, and I'm sure we know the actors and stuff, and we could do a guess the line like we did in Princess Bride. But I'm kind of, this has been 80s adjacent month and 80s month, so I'm gonna do kind of like don't worry, these are tangentially related to the film, to the series. It's practically a film. It's titled kind of as a film in most of the stuff. But anyway, we've got a gambit of 2 questions and 2 scenarios, if you will, involving influences for this show and all sorts of other 80s related things. Because again, you guys love the 80s, even if you don't. All right. Now, this one is this one's like the softball kind of thing. The Duffer Brothers were inspired by many directors that had some of their best work come out of the 1980s. There's a lot of influences we have talked about, but there's a few that we haven't. A few from things that we have actually covered on this podcast. I mean, you could say movies, you can say directors if you know them, but I need 2 of them, and the first person to ring in with the buttons that are at your home that I've mailed to you. Yes.
Did you pay for Prime shipping? Because I don't think mine came in.
Might not have.
Oh.
So this is influences that we have talked about on the podcast that are seen in the show.
Okay, no, influences for Stranger Things that might be like an 80s movie or 80s director or something like that. And we, like, the hint is we might have covered a few of them.
Okay. I mean, I have a button here. I'm pressing my laptop.
Oh, you pressed it. Okay, yes, Jack.
Okay, cool. A few that come to mind would be, I guess, Spielberg, obviously, because you mentioned E.T. and Close Encounters. Are we trying to say ones you didn't mention? Or...
Ones I didn't mention, yes. I will count Spielberg though, because Spielberg's
okay.
done more than
Did
E.T.
you already mention Stephen King?
Did I?
We talked. Yes,
Yes,
we did. We talked
yes.
about
Stand by Me. That's it.
Stand by Me. Yeah,
I would
I have
maybe
one.
John Carpenter.
Oh yes,
That was my answer. That was going to be my answer.
Yes, that is definitely it. John Carpenter with. Oh, go ahead, Joe.
We actually see The Thing playing on a TV in one of the episodes of the show with the science teacher is on a date with some girl and they call him asking how to make a sensory deprivation tank.
Right. And there's The Thing poster in their basement.
Yeah.
Oh. And the Demogorgon does, of course, look a little thing.
Right. Well, we actually see that influence even more in future seasons.
Oh yeah.
That's true.
We'll talk about that later, though.
But that's for another time. It's like, you know what? I think this game show is gonna be you guys versus me, because you both came up with those two answers. So I'll give it to you. You both get 10 points. Very nice. Very nice.
Go team.
All right.
Yeah. All righty. Now on to musical influences. Oh yes. I need you guys to name 2 artists or genres that inspired the score, or the songs that were in the soundtrack for Stranger Things.
Well,
that we haven't.
Are you say we're a team or we're doing it separately?
Team. We'll go for what is it? Okay. If both of you can give me one, I'll give you both points.
Well, one song
we're a little loosey-goosey.
One song that I do remember, that it's the scene where Will dies, or supposedly dies. They're playing Heroes, which Peter Gabriel is singing, but it's originally a David Bowie song. Mm-hmm. I'm assuming they got Peter Gabriel to sing it because it's cheaper.
Yeah.
It's a great cover, but I mean, I'm assuming trying to get the original version of Heroes would have been more expensive, so that's why they use his cover.
Yeah, you're probably right. I'll take that one. That is indeed listed as one of their influences, and of course, being in the show helps too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, other than the famous "Should I Stay or Should I Go" song, like that's playing, it's famously in the show, right? Because it's a plot point that it's in there.
Right.
I'm not a good person to pick out what songs are influenced by people. I do have a question because we're talking about this, which is what was the influence for the opening scene? That opening scene,
the opening theme.
Yeah, yes, thank you. The opening theme show title thing, because that is a really weirdly cool theme that I have not heard anything like that before in a show, at least.
Hint.
Me personally,
we've talked about this guy in the past 2 minutes.
Carpenter.
Yes, indeed.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah,
okay.
A lot of the synthy score, especially the opening, was based off of John Carpenter's work in the scores for his films. Giorgio Moroder, like another one of the big synth pioneers. Well, maybe not synth pioneers. Big synth guys in the 80s. Yeah, and they based a lot of their soundtrack on big names in synthesized music.
Okay.
So yes, I'll count that as well. Another 10 points for you two. Was it bonus points for naming a song, Jack? You get $2 bonus points.
$2 dues.
I'm sorry, no prize money will be distributed. I'm afraid your buttons are your prize. If you haven't gotten them, I cannot be legally held responsible. Anyway. All right, this next one's a little more of a free-form little discussion question. All right. Now, you guys might have heard of the things where, they'll have an arrangement of characters where one protects you and the rest of them try to come after you. Well, I've got some that are related to 80s films and one related to Stranger Things itself. You get points for creativity, which, of course, the points don't matter. But anyway, it's where the game is made up and the rules are made up and the points don't matter. That's what it is.
Yes, that's what.
But yes. Anyway, enough delays for my subpar game making. All right, our first list of characters. You'll have to pick one to defend you from the others. First, in terms of 80s movie protagonists, we've got Marty McFly, Peter Venkman, Indiana Jones, or Rocky Balboa. Jack, you go first.
Oh gosh. I would choose Indiana Jones.
Okay.
I was also going to pick Indiana Jones, but I'm not going to pick the same answer, so I'm instead going to pick Peter Venkman.
Nice. Well,
Very
if
good.
Indiana Jones was a ghost, I think you would win hands down.
I think that if Indiana Jones is a person that can be susceptible to scams,
True. Very true.
Or nuclear-powered projectile devices.
or
Even you
nuclear
have-
power projectile devices, exactly.
Even if you can't kill Indiana Jones, you might be able to bankrupt him. So there you go.
Yeah, there we go. That's what I'm going for.
Yeah, I convinced this guy that half his artifacts were haunted.
I cheated him
That's
out a
all
bunch
you're
of
right.
stuff.
All right. Our next selection of 80s, what is it? 80s antagonists. We've got Slimer, Freddy Krueger, The Terminator, and Biff Tampson.
I mean, obviously the Terminator, right?
Not Biff, the greatest high school bully of all time.
Hello.
No, Biff can die. I want Arnold Schwarzenegger to punch Biff in the face.
Yeah, I feel like the only way Freddy would win is if the Terminator could dream. And I don't know if the Terminator can dream. So
I mean,
do
of electric
Terminators-
sheep, I suppose.
Oh man, you were. I was trying to set it up. I was trying to set it up.
Yes.
Do Terminators dream of electric sheep?
Well, I'm afraid I beat you right to the punch. I'm very, very sorry about that. All right, now for something that's actually related to the show we were watching. All right, your next list is Jim Hopper, 11. I misspelled. I misspelled. Was it Steve's last name? Steve Harrington, or
Ooh.
Trying to the what is it the government lady, that recurring character. I lost her
Oh,
name.
does she even have a name?
I don't think she has a name, actually, come to think of it.
evil scientist
go.
woman.
Evil scientist.
Evil scientist woman.
Yeah, like the lead enforcer or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, she killed Benny, so she has to die.
Yeah. I mean, it's a hard pick between Hopper and Steve. Hopper season. We're talking about season 1, so it's Hopper.
Well, I mean, if you're saying who are you getting to defend you? If we have 11 at peak, then I feel like 11.
Well, yeah, right, but that's the easy answer. We're fun
Right.
answers.
So
interesting
yeah, fun
answers.
answer. That's really hard because it's like Steve is like a dad, but he's also like your bro.
Yeah. Well, it's like in the later seasons, definitely Steve.
Yeah, but
Right
just
now
here,
Right now it's
Yeah.
Hopper. Right now it's Hopper.
straight up.
Very nice. Very good. Well, I've analyzed all the results, put them through my own amazing 80s themed algorithm. Beep, 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 beep. Let's see. The results are in.
He ran a spectrograph.
Good
of our
answers.
voices.
That's right. A spectrograph, an electroencephalogram.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, these are some good choices. I'll say for the first category, I will have to go with Joe in terms of Venkman. It's a good one there. However,
Excellent.
you both picked the Terminator, so that was a close call. Well, you both get equal points there. And yeah, this is the Hopper show. It's a good call.
Yeah.
So yes, in conclusion, you all win and take home this fabulous prize, a box set of the first season of Stranger Things.
Where?
Oh, you didn't get it? Oh, what a shame. Well, we'll just like any other game show that went defunct in the 80s. We'll get you your prizes eventually before being shut down by the FCC.
Okay.
So it's a scam.
Yes, Mr. Venkman. They caused an explosion. Is this true? Yes, sir. This man has no prize.
Oh.
Anyway, do we have any closing thoughts on this wonderful first season of Stranger Things, fellas?
I mean, it absolutely nails the look and sound of the 80s, particularly like the look and sound of 80s films. You can tell there's a lot of love for the 80s, but it doesn't just feel like an echo of the 80s. It stands on its own extremely well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it also stands on its own as a season. Like this season could have been a series, and it's a complete story. Yes, there are some loose ends that are intentionally introduced, to get you interested in a future plot line, but the story is excellent and nicely wraps up, and all of the arcs conclude very satisfactorily, except for Will, who doesn't really get a character arc. That's unfortunate. But yeah, great stuff. But simultaneously, while the characters do go through an arc, you understand how they still have room to grow in a potential future season, which we will talk about next time.
Yes. As always. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, just saying eventually, not next
episode.
But...
Yes, next time we talk about Stranger Things.
Right.
On the next episode of the Stranger Things show, we talk about season 2. Damn, that's really all. I suppose I can try to improve the game, but I mean, how can you improve upon perfection? Like this season, how can you really improve upon perfection? Well, the only way we find out is if you watch the next time we cover Stranger Things. But until then, we have been your lovely hosts, and this has been Background Noise. Be careful not to slip into the upside down, you bodacious dudes and dudettes.